called this piece a glass house perched on the edge of the continent, where the only sounds are the rhythmic crashing of the Pacific Ocean against the cliffs and the wind whistling through the architectural gaps. No burning cities, no frozen cartels, just me, Duke, and silence. Lots of silence. The agency set me up here. Decompression, they called it. I reward for burying Kruger and his data beneath the ice. I'm supposed to be healing. My ribs have knitted back together. The frostbite scars on my fingers have faded to pale white lines. Physically, I am closer to the man I was 10 years ago than the wreck I was in Washington. But the mind is a different kind of battlefield. The problem with silence is that it gets loud when there's no external threat. Your brain starts to invent them. It starts to replay the tapes, the smell of smoke at the vet clinic, the sound of the snowcat's tracks grinding the ice, the look in Senator Clay's eyes right before the end. I sit in this multi-million-dollar fishbowl, surrounded by reinforced glass walls that offer a panoramic view of nothingness. And I feel more exposed than I did in the middle of a firefight. Every shadow that stretches as the sun sets looks like an assassin. Every creak of the settling foundation sounds like a bootstep. Duke is trying his best to be a normal dog again. He sleeps in sunbeams. He chases seagulls on the beach. He wants to believe the war is over. I want to believe it too. But a soldier never really comes home. He just changes his deployment zone to the inside of his own head. It happened on the third night of the second week. The moon was full, casting a brilliant, silvery light over the scrubland behind the house. I couldn't sleep. Sleep is where the dead people live, so I was cleaning my pistol at the kitchen island. Just muscle memory. Strip, clean, Oreo, reassemble. Click, clack. The rhythm of comfort. I happened to glance up, looking through the kitchen window toward the tree line about 200 yards away. There was someone standing there. It wasn't a vague shape. It was distinct. A man. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing what looked like tactical gear. He wasn't moving. He was just standing at the edge of the woods watching the house. Watching me. The adrenaline dump was instantaneous. A cold shock of chemical energy flooding my system. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't think I reacted. I grabbed the pistol, racked the slide, and kicked the back door open, bursting out into the cool night air. Dude, heal, I whispered fiercely. I dropped into a combat crouch, weapon raised, lining up the sights on the intruder. My finger tightened on the trigger, taking up the slack. I was ready to end the threat, but Duke didn't move. He didn't even lift his head from his paws by the door. He just let out a long, bored sigh and went back to sleep. I froze. I looked back at the tree line. The man was gone. Not running away, not taking cover, just gone, as if he had evaporated. I sprinted across the field to the spot where he had been standing. The ground was soft mud from the recent rain. If anyone had been there, there would be prints, deep blue prints. I turned on my tactical light, scanning the ground inch by inch. Nothing. The mud was pristine, undisturbed. No tracks coming, no tracks going. I stood there in the silence, my breath clouding in the night air. The cold weight of the gun in my hand feeling suddenly foolish. Duke was right. There was no one there. But I had seen him. I swear to God, I had seen him. I told myself it was fatigue. A-H-Y-P negagai. C hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and hypervigilance. I told myself I was fine. But then the little things started happening inside the house. Things so small that if you weren't living on a razor's edge, you wouldn't even notice them. I am a creature of habit. Discipline is what kept me alive for 30 years. When I put something down, it stays there until I move it. My keys go in the brass bowl by the door. My watch goes on the nightstand. Face up, my coffee mug sits to the right of the sink. Tuesday morning, I came back from a run along the beach with Duke. I reached for my keys in the bowl. They weren't there. I felt a spike of irritation, then panic. Had I lost them on the beach? No. I remembered putting them there last night. I searched the house, tearing cushions off sofas, checking pockets. Nothing. An hour later, I walked into the kitchen to get water. The keys were sitting in the center of the dining table. A table I hadn't sat at in 3 days. I stared at the keys as if they were a radioactive isotope. Had I put them there in a fugue state? Had I sleepwalked? I looked at Duke. He was watching me with his head cocked to the side, sensing my distress but seeing no physical cause for it. He whimpered softly, nudging my hand with his wet nose. He was telling me I was okay, but I wasn't okay. Someone or something was messing with my environment. For my mind was starting to move the furniture around without my permission. The isolation was supposed to be the cure, but it was becoming the disease. The house had a high-end secure satellite radio system, something the agency installed, so I could stay in touch in case of emergency. I kept it off. I didn't want to hear their voices. On Friday, I was reading in the living room. The sun was beating through the massive glass walls, heating the room like a greenhouse. It was suffocating like bright. Suddenly, the radio speakers crackled to life. Not with music or chatter, but with white noise, static. A harsh, abrasive hiss that filled the silent house. I jumped up, dropping my book. Duke scrambled to his feet, ears flattened against his head. He hated the sound. He barked at the speakers. A sharp, angry bark. Good boy, I thought. You hear it too. It's real. I walked over to the receiver unit built into the wall. It was switched off. The power indicator light was dark, yet the static continued, loud and persistent. I checked the wires. Everything was normal. I slapped the side of the unit. The noise didn't waver. And then, buried deep within the hiss, I heard something else. A rhythm, a pattern. It wasn't just random noise. It sounded like breathing. Slow, raspy, wet breathing, just for a second. Then it was gone, swallowed back into the static. I yanked the power cord out of the wall socket. The silence returned instantly, rushing back into the room like water filling a vacuum. My hands were shaking. Duke was pacing by the door, whining. The threat was real this time. But what kind of threat travels through an unplugged radio? I couldn't stay inside that glass cage anymore. The brightness was blinding me, the silence was deafening me. I needed air. I needed darkness. I waited until nightfall, strapped on my chest, the right gold habits diehard grabbed my rifle, and went out to the perimeter. Patrol, I told Duke. He seemed relieved to be doing something soldierly. We walked the cliff edge, the ocean roaring hundreds of feet below. The salt spray stung my face, grounding me. This was real. The cold air was real. We reached the far side of the property, near the dense scrub brush where I had seen the phantom days before. Suddenly, Duke stopped. His body went rigid. The hair along his spine stood straight up. A mohawk of primal aggression, a low, vibrating growl started deep in his chest, louder and more vicious than I had heard since the Yukon. This was it. The validation I needed. I wasn't crazy. There was something here. I brought the rifle up, snapping on the thermal scope, scanning the brush ahead of us. White hot versus cool blue. I expected to see a heat signature Rayman, a team, even a coyote. Nothing. The scope showed a flat, cool landscape. No heat, no life. What is it? Show me, I whispered frantically to Duke. He took the steps forward, barking furiously now, snapping his jaws at the empty air between two large rocks. He was ready to attack. He was seeing a mortal threat right in front of his face. I lowered the scope, looking with my naked eyes. Darkness. Empty. Space. I looked back through the thermal. Nothing. Duke plunged forward, attacking the emptiness, snarling and biting at the air. I stood there, weapon raised, aiming at absolutely nothing, while my dog fought an invisible demon. A cold terror, colder than any Yukon winter, washed over me. This was the moment the fracture happened. Either my dog had lost his mind, or the world I was seeing was a lie. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know which was worse. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It wants order. It wants cause and effect. But this house denies me that. After the incident with Duke barking at nothing on the cliff, I retreated inside. I decided to trust technology over my own senses. The house is rigged with a closed-circuit camera system. 12 high-definition eyes watching every corner, recording to a secure server in the basement. If there was a phantom, the cameras would catch it. I spent the next 48 hours in the server room, the blue light of the monitors burning my retinas. I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame. Nothing. Just hours of me pacing, me sitting, me sleeping. But then, I found it. Or I thought I found it. Timestamp 3:33 a.m. Camera 4. The hallway. On the screen, I saw myself walking to the kitchen for water. But as the screen Marcus walked past the guest bedroom, the image stuttered. A digital artifact. A pixelated tear in the reality of the video. In that split second of corruption, behind the digital noise, there was a shape. A silhouette standing in the doorway of the guest room. It wasn't a shadow. It had mass. It was watching me walk by. I rewound the footage, played it again. The glitch happened again, but the shape was different, fainter. I played it a third time. The glitch was gone. The footage was clean. I stared at the monitor, my hands trembling. Had I imagined the glitch? Or had someone some advanced algorithm? Some hacker erased it in real time while I was watching. I looked at Duke sleeping on the rug. He hadn't moved at 3:33. If there was a man in the hallway, surely he would have smelled him. Unless the man had no scent. Unless the man was a ghost in the machine. I needed an anchor. Something analog in a digital world. Inception style. I took my old service knife. The one with the jagged edge from prying open a crate in Syria, and placed it on the center of the kitchen island. I aligned it perfectly with the grain of the marble. If anyone entered this house, if anyone moved anything, the knife would tell me. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I slept in the living room chair, facing the kitchen, pistol in my lap. I was waiting for the invisible man to make a mistake. 3 days passed. The knife didn't move. The silence was absolute. I began to doubt myself. Maybe the agency was right. Maybe the trauma of the frozen lake, the avalanche, the killing. Maybe it had finally cracked the ceramic of my mind. I went to the bathroom to wash my face, to splash cold water on the burning fatigue in my eyes. When I came back to the kitchen, I froze. The knife was exactly where I left it, but next to it, sitting upright with impossible precision, was a Zippo lighter. Not just any lighter. It was silver, scratched with a specific dent on the lid. It was Senator Clay's lighter, the one I had taken from his desk in Washington. The one I had dropped into the black water of Lake Bennett when the ice broke. I watched it sink. I saw it vanish into the deep. It was at the bottom of a frozen lake in Canada, 3,000 miles away. And now it was sitting on my kitchen counter in California. I reached out to touch it, half expecting my hand to pass through a hologram. It was cold, wet. It smelled of lake water and algae. This wasn't a hallucination. Someone had retrieved it. Someone had brought it here. Someone was telling me there is nowhere you can hide. The lighter changed everything. It wasn't just paranoia anymore, it was a siege. But a siege against what? I swept the house for bugs, for hidden passages, for holograms. Nothing. The walls were solid concrete, the glass was bulletproof laminate. There was no way in. That night, a storm rolled in off the Pacific. Rain lashed against the glass walls like handfuls of gravel. The wind howled, shaking the frame of the house. I was in the main atrium, the glass ceiling above me flashing with lightning. Then I heard it. Amidst the chaos of the rain, the heavy, rhythmic thudding directly above my head. Thunk, thump, thunk. Footsteps. Heavy boots walking on the glass roof. I looked up. A flash of lightning illuminated the wet glass. For a second, I thought I saw the soles of boots pressing against the pane. A dark shape crouching on the skylight, looking down at me. I raised my rifle, aiming at the ceiling. I see you. I screamed, my voice cracking. I see you, you son of a bitch. I ran to the patio door, unlocking it and sprinting out into the storm. I climbed the service ladder to the roof, the wind trying to tear me off the rungs. I vaulted onto the flat roof, weapon ready, tactical light sweeping the wet surface. Empty, just rain dancing on the glass. No one, no ropes, no escape route. I looked down through the skylight into my own living room. I saw Duke standing there, looking up at me. He wasn't barking. He was tilting his head, watching his master chase ghosts in a hurricane. I stood there, soaked to the bone, shivering not from cold but from a terrifying realization the footsteps had been loud, distinct, real. But the roof was empty. Was the sound coming from outside? Or was it playing inside my head? I retreated back inside, blocking the doors, barricading the entrances with furniture. Irrational. I know. Furniture won't stop a ghost. It won't stop a memory. I sat in the corner of the room, wrapped in a blanket, shivering. Then the smell hit me. At first it was faint like almonds or maybe old flowers. Sweet, sickly. It was coming from the ventilation ducts. I scrambled over to the vent, sniffing. Yes, definitely a chemical agent. They were gassing me. That explained the hallucinations, the footsteps, the glitch. They weren't decompressing me, they were experimenting on me. They were testing psychops drugs on a tier 1 operator to see how long he takes to break. Not today, I growled. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from my kit and began frantically sealing every vent in the house. Taping over the gaps, the seams, the outlets. Duke watched me, sneezing once. Or was he reacting to the dust I was kicking up? I couldn't trust him anymore. Maybe they conditioned him. Maybe he was part of the control group. I looked at my dog, my partner, my brother, and for the first time I felt a spike of suspicion. Why was he so calm? Why wasn't he affected? I grabbed my gas mask souvenir from the subway tunnels in D.C. and strapped it on. The rubber sealed tight against my face, the raspy sound of my own breathing filling my ears. Now I was safe. Now I could think. But looking at my reflection in the dark window, a masked monster with wild eyes, I realized I didn't look like a survivor. I looked like the villain. I lived in the mask for 2 days. I drank water through a straw. I didn't eat. Hunger clarifies the mind, sharpens the senses. I spent my time tapping the walls, listening to the echo. Concrete, concrete, concrete. Hello. I stopped. I was in the master bedroom, the one I never used. The wall behind the headboard looked solid, painted white, smooth, perfect. But the sound, when I tapped it with the butt of my knife, it didn't thud. It resonated like a drum. There was a space behind it, a space that shouldn't exist on the blueprints. I looked at Duke. He was standing at the door of the bedroom. He wouldn't come inside. He was whining a low, pathetic sound. He smelled it too, not gas, not a ghost. He smelled rot, or oil, or something human. I didn't hesitate. I went to the garage and grabbed the sledgehammer. I walked back to the bedroom, the weight of the hammer comforting in my hands. I stood before the pristine white wall. "Come out," I whispered. "Game over." I swung. CRACK. The drywall shattered, dust billowing out. I swung again. CRASH. I hole large enough to see through. I shined my flashlight into the void. It wasn't just a crawl space. It was a corridor. A narrow, serviced corridor running inside the walls of the house. And on the floor of that secret corridor, caught in the beam of my light, was a fresh footprint. A muddy boot print. The same mud from the cliff edge. I wasn't crazy. The invisible man wasn't a ghost. He was in the walls. He had been watching me, sleeping next to me, breathing the same air. And judging by the direction of the tracks, he was still in there. I stood before the jagged hole in the drywall, the sledgehammer heavy in my hand, staring into the abyss I had created. The darkness inside wasn't empty, it was breathing. A draft of stale, cold air hit my face, carrying the metallic scent of copper wire and the sweet, rotting odor of dead mice. This wasn't just a gap between studs, it was a purposefully built infrastructure. The architects hadn't just built a house, they had built a machine, and I was looking at its gears. "Duke, stay," I whispered. The dog was pacing nervously, his nails clicking on the hardwood floor. He couldn't follow me here. He was too big, too loud. This was a war for rats and snakes. I holstered my pistol. It was too bulky for the tight squeeze and drew my tactical knife. I also grabbed the flashlight, gripping it in my teeth. I squeezed my shoulders through the hole, the rough edges of the broken gypsum scraping my skin. Inside, the world shrank. The space was barely 2 feet wide, a claustrophobic tunnel of wooden beams, pink insulation foam, and bundles of thick black cables running like arteries along the floor. I had to crawl on my elbows and knees, dragging my body through the dust of a decade. The silence here was different. It was heavy, insulated. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, the creak of the house settling against the cliff wind. I shined the light down the corridor. It stretched on for 30 feet, turning a sharp corner near the living room. In the dust, the boot prints continued, deliberate, heavy. Someone knew this maze perfectly. I wasn't chasing a ghost anymore, I was crawling into the throat of the monster. 10 minutes of agonizing crawling brought me to a widened section of the service corridor, located directly behind the master bathroom's mirror. Here, the insulation had been ripped away to clear a space about 4 feet square. It was a nest, a squalid, terrifying testament to obsession. There was a sleeping bag rolled up in the corner, gray with filth, empty ration packs, military-grade MRS were stacked neatly against a beam. Bottles of urine. This wasn't a temporary hiding spot. Someone had been living here for weeks, maybe months, since the day I arrived. But it was the wall facing the bathroom that froze my blood. The drywall had been carefully drilled. Small, pin-sized holes. I put my eye to one. I could see the entire bathroom clearly. The sink, the shower, the toilet. I moved to the next hole. It looked into the bedroom. The next one looked into the kitchen. He hadn't just been hiding, he had been the director of my life. He watched me sleep. He watched me eat. He watched me break down. The psychological violation was more violent than any bullet. I saw a notebook lying on the sleeping bag. I opened it. It was filled with timestamps and notes. 8 o'clock, minus target wakes up. 15 minus coffee. 9:30, minus panic attack observed. Subject is degrading. My handwriting. It looked like my handwriting, but it wasn't. It was a perfect mimicry. He wasn't just watching me, he was studying to become me. I pushed past the nest, deeper into the dark. The rage was starting to burn away the fear. I wanted to find this man. I wanted to tear him out of the walls and throw him off the cliff. The corridor dipped downwards, following the slope of the roofline. I came to a section where the walls were covered in photos. Hundreds of them, taped to the wood, pinned to the insulation. I shone my light on the collage. It was a timeline of my life. There were photos of me in Kandahar, young and stupid. Photos of me with my ex-wife, taken from a distance. Photos of the burning house in Oak Haven. Photos of Duke as a puppy. Where did he get these? Some of these were classified. Some were personal memories I thought only I possessed. And in the center of the shrine, there was a large blueprint of this glass house. Red marker lines were drawn all over it, marking blind spots, acoustic weak points, and gas entry points. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a dissection. He had engineered every moment of my terror. The glitch on the camera, Prepland, the footsteps on the roof, a mechanical thumper device he marked on the map, the radio static, a frequency jammer. I was a rat in a maze, and he was the scientist with the clipboard. I ripped a photo of Duke off the wall, crumpling it in my fist. "I'm coming for you," I hissed into the darkness. A sound ahead of me, a scuffling of leather against wood. He was here. He hadn't fled, he was waiting, or perhaps he was trapped just like me. The corridor narrowed again, forcing me onto my stomach. I held the knife in my lead hand, pulling myself forward with my elbows. The flashlight beam cut through the dust motes, dancing on the chaotic wiring. Then I saw it, a boot, just the heel, disappearing around a vertical support beam 10 yards ahead. "Stop!" I roared, the sound deafening in the confined space. I scrambled forward, ignoring the splinters digging into my arms. I rounded the beam, ready to strike. He was there, but he wasn't facing me. He was squeezing through a narrow hatch in the floor. All I saw was his back clad in black tactical gear, identical to mine, same vest, same boots, even the patch on his shoulder. The unit patch, my old unit. Was it a mirror? No. He turned his head just before he dropped through. He was wearing a mask. A smooth, white, featureless ballistic mask. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank white slate reflecting my light. He didn't speak. He didn't shoot. He just dropped into the darkness below, sliding a heavy steel grate shut over his head. I threw myself at the grate, slamming my knife into the metal, but the lock clicked shut. I was inches away. I could smell him. He smelled like ozone undoled blood. I hammered on the grate with the pommel of my knife until my hand went numb. It was reinforced steel, impenetrable. I put my face to the bars, shining my light down into the shaft. It wasn't just a crawl space exit. It was a service ladder dropping down into a concrete silo. The beam of my light didn't hit the bottom. This house, this glass cage on the cliff, it was just the tip of the iceberg. The real structure was underground, deep inside the cliff rock. I heard his boots clambering down the ladder, the sound echoing metallic ally. Clang, 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 fading away. Then a heavy hydraulic door hissed and slammed shut with a boom that shook the dust from the ceiling above me. I was left alone in the walls. I rolled onto my back, staring at the pink insulation, gasping for air. The realization washed over me like ice water. The invisible man wasn't an assassin sent to kill me. He was a keeper, and I had just discovered the door to the dungeon. I had to get back to Duke. I had to find a way down there, because whatever answers I needed, whatever truth about why my life had been destroyed, it was buried in the concrete roots of this mountain. The house was the lie. The truth was the lie. Getting out of the walls was harder than getting in. I had to backtrack, scraping my bruised elbows against the raw wood until I reached the garage access panel. When I burst out into the cool air of the garage, covered in insulation, dust, and spitter bears, Duke was waiting. He barked once, a sound of relief, and tackled me. I know, boy. I know, I whispered, checking his collar. He was real. He was the only thing in this world that wasn't a lie. But we couldn't stay. The man in the white mask, my shadow, was down below, and he had the answers. I searched the garage for the entrance to the shaft I had seen. It had to be here. I moved the heavy tool chests, scanning the concrete floor for seams. Nothing. Then I saw it. The workbench. It was bolted to the floor, which made no sense for a modular workspace. I applied pressure to the side. It slid open on silent hydraulic rails, revealing a heavy blast-proof steel door set into the foundation. It looked like the entrance to a nuclear silo. There was a keypad for digits. I thought back to the shrine in the wall, the timestamps in the notebook. 3:33, the time of the glitch. It was a long shot, but instinct is all I had left. I punched in the numbers. Beep, beep, beep. Green light. The heavy locks clanked open with a sound like a gunshot. The door swung inward, revealing a spiral staircase plunging into infinite darkness. But it wasn't the darkness that stopped me cold. It was the smell rising from the depths. It smelled like antiseptic and old blood. HOOK. Why was there a military-grade bunker under a civilian safe house? And who was bleeding down there? We descended. The metal stairs rang out with every step. A dinner bell for whatever was waiting at the bottom. The air grew colder, wetter. We went down 50 feet, then 100. We were deep inside the cliff rock now, far below the sea level. The sounds of the ocean were gone, replaced by the low, throbbing hum of heavy generators. This wasn't just a panic room. This was a facility. We reached the bottom landing. A long concrete corridor stretched out ahead, lit by flickering fluorescent strips that buzzed like angry wasps. The walls were lined with pipes and thick cables. It looked like the bowels of a battleship. I moved tactically, sweeping corners, weapon raised. Duke stayed low, his nose working overtime. We passed doors labeled with cryptic alphanumeric codes SE Kane, OMNI2, PSY4. I stopped at a heavy door marked OBSCRVAAIONA. The window was reinforced glass. I wiped the condensation away and looked inside. It was a room filled with monitors, dozens of them, and on every single screen there was a live feed of the glass house upstairs, the kitchen, the bedroom, even the bathroom. But one screen caught my eye. It showed the living room right now, and in the chair where I usually sat, there was a mannequin, dressed in my clothes, sitting exactly how I sit. They weren't just watching me, they were replicating me, practicing on a dummy before they got to the real thing. I pushed away from the door, bow rising in my throat. I wanted to burn this place down, but I needed to find the source. We pushed deeper into the labyrinth. The corridor opened up into a larger hall filled with rows of metal filing cabinets and server racks. It was an archive, A library of secrets. I walked down the aisle, reading the labels. Operation Cold Snap, Project Blackwood, and then Subject Watchman. My file. I pulled the drawer open. It wasn't just a file, it was a life history. My birth certificate, my school records, my psychological evaluations from the military. But as I flipped through the pages, I found something impossible. There were medical reports dated 3 months ago, during the time I was supposedly recovering in the house. Report 14, subject shows resistance to auditory hallucinations. Increased dosage of compound B. Report 22, subject's bond with canine is the primary psychological anchor. Recommend termination of canine to induce total breakdown. I froze. I looked down at Duke. They weren't just studying us. They were actively trying to drive me insane. They were pulling the strings of reality to see when I would snap. And the recommendation to terminate Duke. It was stamped APPROVED for tomorrow. I wasn't a patient. I was a lab rat. And my dog's execution date was set for sunrise. Rage is a useful fuel. It burns hot and fast. I didn't care about stealth anymore. I racked the slide of my rifle. Let's go, Duke. We're leaving. And we're taking everyone down on the way out. We moved to the end of the archive, towards a set of double doors marked L, ABORATORY. I kicked them open. The room beyond was sterile white, blindingly bright. In the center sat a dentist chair with heavy leather restraints. Next to it, a tray of surgical instruments on syringes, filled with a clear blue liquid. But the room wasn't empty. Lying on a gurney in the corner, covered by a sheet, was a body. I walked over, weapon trained on the shape. I pulled back the sheet. It was a man. He was wearing the black tactical gear. He was wearing the white mask. The invisible man I had chased into the walls. But when I pulled the mask off, I dropped it. The face staring back at me wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a clone. It was nobody. His face had been surgically altered. No nose, no lips, just smooth, grafted skin over bone. A blank slate. A human mannequin designed to terrify. But the terrifying part wasn't his face. It was the tattoo on his neck. The same unit patch I wore. The same blood type. Oh, negative. This man wasn't just an actor. He was a former brother in arms. Another retired operator they had turned into a monster. If they could do this to him, what were they planning to do to me in that chair? We had to get out. Now. I grabbed a drive from the computer terminal insurance and turned to leave. But the blast doors we came in through slammed shut. CLANG. The electronic locks engaged. A voice echoed over the intercom system. It wasn't the distorted voice of Kruger. It was calm, female, professional. Test phase complete. Subject has engaged with the truth. Initiate Phase 5. The Reflection. The wall at the far end of the laboratory began to slide open. It revealed a massive glass pane. On the other side of the glass was another room, a perfect replica of the laboratory I was standing in. And standing in that room, looking directly at me through the glass, was a man. He was wearing my clothes. He had my face, he had my rifle, and at his side was a German Shepherd identical to Duke. I raised my hand. He raised his. I tilted my head. He tilted his. It wasn't a mirror. The movements were slightly off. A millisecond delay. It wasn't a reflection. It was a live feed, or a hologram, or something worse. Who are you? I shouted. The man on the other side didn't speak. He just smiled. A cold, dead smile that didn't reach his eyes. And then, the Duke on his side lunged at the glass, snarling soundlessly. The barrier between us was getting thinner. Phase 5 wasn't about watching. It was about replacement. Was I the original, or was I just the copy that finally woke up? I stared at the man behind the glass. He stared back. The resemblance was terrifyingly perfect. The scar on the chin, the weary slump of the shoulders, even the way his finger rested on the trigger guard for a second, a long, agonizing second. I felt the floor of my reality tilt. Was I the reflection? Was I the one trapped in the box? The voice on the intercom had called this Phase 5. They wanted me to question my own existence. They wanted me to hesitate, because in my line of work, hesitation is the only thing that kills you faster than a bullet. But then, the copy blinked. It was a micro stutter, a frame rate drop, a glitch in the rendering. I saw it. Duke saw it too. He stopped rolling at the other dog and looked up at me. Confused. This wasn't a clone. It wasn't magic. It was theater. It was a high-resolution projection on smart glass, designed to induce a psychotic break. A parlor trick for $1 billion torture chamber. Nice try, I muttered, raising my rifle. I didn't aim at the man. I aimed at the projector lens hidden in the upper corner of the ceiling behind the glass. I squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The glass wall didn't just break, it exploded. The projection flickered and died, leaving only sparks showering down on an empty gray concrete room on the other side. The copy vanished into static. I stepped through the shards of shattered glass, my boots crunching on the debris of their lie. I wasn't the copy. I was the sledgehammer, and I was about to bring the whole house down. The moment the glass shattered, the facility screamed. Clicks. A Nessie erupted, a harsh, rhythmic blaring that vibrated in my teeth. The calm female voice returned, but this time she wasn't calm. Containment breach in Sector 4. Initiate purge protocol. Venting atmosphere in T-60 seconds. They weren't sending guards. They were flushing the toilet. They were going to suck the oxygen out of the room, or fill it with nerve gas. I heard the hiss before I saw it. Vents in the ceiling opened up, spewing a thick, yellow-green gas. It rolled down the walls like a heavy curtain. "Mask," I shouted, though the muffled sound was lost in the alarms. I already had mine on, but Duke was exposed. I grabbed the emergency oxygen, hood from the medical tray meant for patients, and shoved it over Duke's head, tightening the seal around his neck. He panicked for a second, thrashing, but I held him tight, looking into his eyes. "Trust me," I signaled. He calmed down, the small bellows on the hood inflating with his breath. The gas hit the floor. Visibility dropped to 0. We were navigating a toxic fog. I grabbed a tablet from the control desk, downloading the facility schematics, and kicked the laboratory door open. We had to get to the ventilation shaft. The only way out was up, but the gas was rising with us, chasing us up the spiral staircase like a living thing. We burst out of the stairwell onto level 1, the maintenance floor just below the garage. The air here was still clear, but not for long. The blast doors at the end of the hall began to open. I dropped to a knee behind a concrete pillar, checking my ammo. 2 magazines left. 12 rounds in a pistol. Not enough for a war. Through the doors marched a squad of them. 4 men, all wearing the same black gear. All wearing the same smooth, featureless white ballistic masks. They moved in perfect unison, like marionettes pulled by the same string. They didn't shout commands. They didn't seek cover. They just advanced, weapons raised, marching into my line of fire with 0 fear of death. These weren't soldiers. They were the hollow men I had seen in the lab, stripped of identity, conditioned to obey, lobotomized killing machines. I fired. Double tap. The first one dropped, his white mask shattering to reveal the ruin beneath. The others didn't even flinch. They just stepped over his body and kept coming. It was terrifying. Fighting a man is one thing, fighting a biological robot is another. I needed an equalizer. I looked at the exposed pipes running along the ceiling, main hydraulic line. High pressure. I aimed high and blew the coupling. A jet of pressurized hydraulic fluid erupted like a geyser, hitting the squad with the force of a fire hose, knocking 2 of them off their feet and blinding the third. In the chaos, Duke and I sprinted past them, sliding under the closing garage hatch just as their bullets sparked off the concrete behind my heels. We were out of the dungeon, but we weren't free. We emerged into the living room of the glass house. It was night now. The storm outside had turned into a hurricane. Rain lashed against the massive windows, warping the view of the cliffs into a watery nightmare. But the house wasn't the sanctuary I had left. It was in full lockdown mode. Steel shutters had descended over the doors, sealing us in. The smart glass windows had turned opaque black. The lights were cut. We were wrapped in a fishbowl at the bottom of the ocean. The voice on the intercom was glitching now. repeating the same phrase over and over, subject unstable. Subject unstable. Terminate. Terminate. I could hear the hydraulic locks on the basement door, the one we just came from, starting to cycle. The faceless men were cutting through the garage door. We had maybe 3 minutes before they breached the living room. I looked around the beautiful, expensive prison, the minimalist furniture, the sleek counters. It was all a set, a stage built for my suffering. I wasn't going to die here, and I certainly wasn't going to let them use this place to break another soldier. If they wanted to terminate the subject, it'd give them a termination they'd see from space. I ran to the kitchen. I turned on all 6 burners of the gas stove. I didn't light them. I just let the gases out. His SS, the smell of mercaptan filled the air, mixing with the ozone of the storm. The room was filling with gas fast. It was heavy, dizzying. I ripped the curtains down and soaked them in the high-proof alcohol-formed bar cart, piling them by the main atrium window, the only glass that wasn't shuttered with steel. I checked the basement door. The metal was starting to glow orange. They were cutting through with a thermal lance. Sparks showered onto the floor. They were almost through. I looked at Duke. We're going for a run, buddy. I fast one. I grabbed a heavy iron sculpture from the mantelpiece. Some modern art piece that cost more than my first car, and hurled it with all my strength at the atrium window. CRASH. The wind and drain exploded into the room, swirling the gas, feeding it with fresh oxygen. It was now a bomb waiting for a trigger. I climbed out onto the wet patio, Duke scrambling after me. The wind nearly blew me off the cliff. I looked back inside. The basement door gave way with a groan of tortured metal. The faceless men poured into the kitchen, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They didn't see me. They didn't smell the gas. They just saw the empty room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Zippo. Senator Clay's lighter. The impossible object they had used to taunt me. I flipped the lid. Clink. I spun the wheel. The flame flared up, dancing in the gale. You wanted to gaslight me. I whispered to the house, to the agency, to the ghosts in the walls. Here is your light. I threw the Zippo into the kitchen. The universe held its breath for a fraction of a second. The Zippo lighter tumbled through the air in slow motion, a tiny rotating star against the storm. When it crossed the threshold into the gas-saturated kitchen, physics took over. It wasn't a fire, it was a concussion. The air inside the house ignited instantly, expanding at supersonic speed. I didn't hear the boom. The sound was too loud for human ears to process. It was just a physical slam against my entire body. The pressure wave hit me like a freight train, lifting me and Duke off the wet patio and throwing us 20 feet back towards the tree line. Above us, the glass house disintegrated. Massive panes of reinforced laminate shattered into billions of diamonds, showering the cliffside with lethal confetti. The concrete roof lifted, groaned, and collapsed inward. burying the faceless man in a tomb of fire and rubble. The heat washed over me, singing the hair on my arms even through the rain. I lay in the mud, ears ringing, watching the symbol of my imprisonment turn into a twisted skeleton of steel and flame. They wanted to study my breaking point. Well, here is the data. I checked Duke first. He was shaken, covered in mud, but alive. He shook himself off, staring at the inferno with a primal satisfaction. We stood up and walked back towards the wreckage. The heat was intense, battling the freezing rain, creating a thick fog of steam. The house was gone. The sleek furniture, the hidden cameras, the secret corridors all erased. I climbed over a slab of broken concrete to where the kitchen used to be. The devastation was absolute. There were no bodies, at least, none that resembled humans anymore. Just charred shapes amidst the twisted rebar. But I wasn't looking for bodies. I was looking for the server, the brain of the house. I found the remains of the sublevel entrance. The blast had collapsed the tunnel, sealing the underground lab forever. Whatever secrets, whatever clones or prisoners were down there, they were buried under 1,000,000 tons of rock. It was a grave, and standing on top of it, watching the flames lick the rain, I felt lighter. The paranoia was gone. The voices were gone. The only thing left was the clean, honest smell of burning. I was turning to leave when I saw it. Amidst the blackened debris of the living room, something was blinking. A blue LED light. It was the secure satellite radio unit, the one I had ripped out of the wall days ago. It had been shielded by a fallen concrete beam. I walked over and kicked the debris aside. The unit was cracked, scorched, but still functioning on its internal battery. And it wasn't just blinking. It was transmitting. A data upload bar on the small screen was at 99%. Uploading subject profile. Complete. They hadn't just watched me. They had extracted everything. My reactions, my tactics, my psychological profile. The entire house was a data mine, and I had just given them the final chapter. I smashed the screen with my boot, crushing the electronics into dust. But I knew it was too late. The data was already in the cloud. Somewhere in a clean, air-conditioned office indeed. C, or Geneva, someone was watching this feed. Someone was analyzing the explosion and smiling. I hadn't destroyed their experiment, I had just completed it. Suddenly, a sound cut through the crackle of the fire. A ringtone. Standard. Digital, generic. It was coming from the pocket of one of the dead, faceless men protruding from the rubble. I reached down and pulled out a satellite phone. The screen said hello, CKEDIV. I hesitated, then answered. I didn't speak. I just listened to the rain and the breathing on the other end. Impressive, a voice said. It was male, distorted, synthesized. Most subjects break in phase 3. You made it to phase 6. Who are you? I asked, my voice rasping with smoke. You know who we are, Marcus. We are the ones who made you. and we are the ones who just upgraded you. I killed your men. I destroyed your lab. Assets, the voice corrected. Depreciating assets. You were the investment. And now you are ready for the real work. Check the glove box of the car in the driveway. There is a file. Don't disappoint us. The line went dead. I found the car, a black SUV, parked at the edge of the property, untouched by the blast. Inside the glove box, there was a single manila envelope. No name, no stamp. Just a set of coordinates and a photograph. I looked at the photo. It wasn't a target. It wasn't a politician. It was me. But a younger me, standing next to a man I hadn't seen in 20 years. A man who was supposed to be dead, my commanding officer, the ghost from my past. I looked at Duke. He was sitting in the passenger seat, waiting. He didn't care about the conspiracy. He didn't care about the invisible man. He just wanted to know where the hunt was going next. I tossed the phone into the burning ruins of the house and climbed into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. The glass house burned like a beacon on the cliff for the man I used to be. The test was over. The simulation was finished. I put the car in gear. "Let's go, Duke," I whispered. "We have a ghost to catch."